Monson, Artorius, and Casey sat around Monson's coffee table, staring at the completely ordinary envelope. Anyone that saw the three might find their behavior very curious, but only because they did not understand the gravity of the situation. On the surface, this envelope was like any other, but in actuality, the small white object was, or could be, so much more. A certain level of awe surrounded the boys as they sat completely intoxicated by the possibilities Barty's letter held. Casey, as usual, could not stand the quiet. He cleared his throat as he started to speak.
"So he came specifically to talk to you?"
Monson affirmed the truth of Casey's question.
"Yeah, of course, as always. I have no idea why."
Casey threw his hands up, interlocking them around his neck.
"And you didn't think to ask?"
Monson shook his head.
"Dude, now that is heavy."
Artorius picked the envelope up, eyeing it apprehensively.
"Open it, Grey. Enough messing around."
Monson smiled weakly.
"Okay, Arthur. Hand it here."
Artorius placed the envelope in Monson's outstretched hand. Monson's hand started to tingle as he slid his finger under the seal of the envelope's lip. He ripped the paper, careful not to harm the contents. Once opened, he peered inside the envelope, only to see a white folded piece of paper that was just as plain and ordinary as the envelope itself. He removed the paper, tossing the packaging aside. He slowly unfolded it. He read it aloud.
"GM Inner Gardens, main gazebo, 10 o'clock tonight. Come alone."
That's some really cloak and dagger stuff right there. Why do you think he wants to see you alone?
Monson shrugged.
"Who knows? Maybe he wants to reminisce about my grandfather."
Artorius rubbed at his stubble with his massive hand.
"Doubtful. I don't know if you should go, Grey. It could be dangerous."
Monson chewed on his lip, thinking.
"I don't know if we should read that much into it. You saw how Barty was acting during the assembly and at dinner. He's a weird one. This is probably just him being theatrical."
"I think I'm with Arthur on this one, Grey."
Casey gestured towards Monson, indicating his desire to see the note.
"This is a little too clear and present danger for me."
Monson shot Casey a questioning glance.
"Clear and present danger?"
Casey's face elongated, indicating his disbelief.
"Oh, come on, Grey. Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan? International thriller?"
Monson stared at Casey blankly, a look Casey returned with resignation. He called to Artorius.
"Arthur, can you add that to the list of—"
"Already on it, Case."
"Thank you, Arthur."
Now satisfied, Casey returned to the question at hand.
"Anyway, Grey, I really don't think you should go tonight. For all we know, he could be a crazed ninja assassin come to kill you, drink your blood, and dance on your corpse. There are just too many things to consider."
Monson sat up, stretching his back as he did.
"Like what?"
Your safety for one."
Artorius nodded his agreement.
"Did you forget, a little over a week ago, someone attacked the diamond for absolutely no perceivable reason? Everyone loves Peterson. Well, except for maybe Derek. But not even Derek would go so far as to actually try something physical.
Oh, and let's not forget Peterson has a second-degree black belt in Kempo. Freaking Kempo, Grey. You saw the picture. Damien looked half dead."
"I already look half dead, so I guess I don't have anything to worry about."
Artorius almost started yelling.
"I'm being serious here, Grey. Something weird is going on. We can't let you see this dude. Not like this."
"Arthur, you don't understand. This might be my chance, my one and only chance for some answers about my past. I have to go. If I don't, I'm going to regret it. I know I will."
"Look, I understand your dilemma, Grey, but finding out about your past is not more important than keeping you in one piece."
Monson gritted his teeth in borderline anger.
"Artorius, what on earth are you on about? This isn't conspiracy theory or eagle eye. I'm a high school student. and not even one of consequence. Look, I appreciate the love, but your concern is totally out of proportion to the situation.
I've just got a bad feeling about all of this. This whole Barty thing is weird. Basically what I'm saying...
No, Arthur. There's no way that I'm not going...
Artorius' eyebrows furrowed as he threw up a hand.
Dude, chill. I wasn't saying that you shouldn't go.
But you...
Artorius threw up his other hand.
What I meant is, you shouldn't go alone. You need someone to watch your back. Who better than us?
A frazzled heart burst through a facade of reinforced composure, highlighting the gratitude that Monson could no longer hide. Artorius and Casey really were the best friends anyone could ask for. However, he knew that their worry was misplaced, seeing he was pretty sure he was the one that attacked Damien. But how was he going to get them to stay behind? If he was being truthful, he already knew that short of lying to them, they would not stay. This was problematic, as he could not stand the thought of lying to them. There were already too many secrets floating around. His only hope was to figure out a way to keep them out of sight while he went to meet with Barty. He studied the faces of his two friends.
Do you guys even know where the inner gardens are?
They both nodded their heads.
Fine, you can come, but you have to stay out of sight.
Artorius and Casey whooped, smacking their hands together in this hand-slapping, knuckle-pounding sort of greeting that was super confusing. Monson was absolutely amazed that he had yet to see it. He was attempting to work out its various parts when Casey spoke up again.
You won't even know we're there. We'll be like Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden.
Monson sighed.
Who's Ryu Hayabusa?
Casey mimicked Monson's sigh.
Arthur.
It's right here, Case.
Monson bobbled the thin case that Artorius threw into his hands. The cover read, Ninja Gaiden 3. Artorius gestured towards the game.
I hate to come back to this, Casey, but I've had time to think about it, and I disagree with you. Ryu's definitely not a real ninja.
Casey popped out of his seat dramatically.
Not a real ninja? How can you even say that? Of course he's a real ninja. And not just a ninja. He's the ninja, Arthur. The dragon ninja?
Casey, there's no way Ryu is a ninja. Ninja were assassins trained in the arts of spying and stealth. You've played Ninja Gaiden. What about Ryu's actions are stealthy?
Arthur. When you're the god of destruction dressed in a black pleather suit, you don't need to be stealthy.
You aren't seriously going to argue.
Monson grabbed for his remote and the Xbox 360 controller, feeling jaded, but at the same time content. The opening credits of Ninja Gaiden 3 flared to life as Monson prepared to fight and ascertain, at least until 10 o'clock, whether Ryu Hayabusa really was a ninja or not. Maybe he could pick up some moves along the way. Sneaking out of the barracks after curfew, while stressful, was disquietingly easy. At the designated hour, Monson, Artorius, and Casey took the private elevator to the ground floor and crept into the atrium, doing their best to proceed as inconspicuously as they could. While none of them would readily admit it, there was a tangible feeling of adventure and recklessness trickling through their little group. So much so, they over-exaggerated every action and movement, hiding behind too small vegetation and statues. It was because of this foolish behavior that it took them almost 10 minutes to reach the front doors of the atrium. Monson's keycard was in his hand even before he realized it. He motioned the blue plastic card towards the door sensor when...
Grey, no!
Casey jumped forward, smacking Monson's hand away from the card reader, knocking the blue plastic key to the ground. Monson rubbed at his smarting hand.
Ouch, Case. What was that all about? You can't be serious, dude. Hello? This is an electronic lock. They had to program it to accept that thing. So what do you think that means? I don't know, someone has too much time on their hands?
Casey slapped Monson upside his head.
Grey, you are seriously the dumbest smart person I've ever met. No, dude. It means they have a record of who came in and out.
Monson whistled, rubbing at his head.
My bad. But then how are we going to get...
Casey opened the door and glanced back, smirking over his shoulder.
Boy Scout motto, my lord,
said Casey in his best British accent.
Always be prepared. Don't let him fool you, Grey,
cut in Artorius.
It was my idea.
Casey tried his best to glare at Artorius, but seemed to be finding it difficult to hold back his amusement. He relented, starting to chuckle as he walked out the door. The trio exited the front doors of the barracks, prickling from the edgy nip of the cool night air. The brilliant luster of thousands of stars littered the sky like diamonds in blackened rock. The residual light from sparsely spaced lamps hardly dampened the effect of the formidable darkness. While the blackness of the night was imposing, it also held a certain air of freedom. To Monson, the view was absolutely breathtaking, and the setting could not have been more perfect. Under the cover of night, he could be anyone or anything, and did not have to worry about searching eyes or judgmental hearts. He could be him. Though to be him meant to be afraid of the darkness that provided him his freedom, as that darkness could be scary in its own right. He fought that feeling. The presence of his friends seemed to fortify him in combating his fear, pushing it into a tucked-away, private place where he could leave it to decay with other concerns like self-pity and doubt. The lack of light was also a great asset for their midnight endeavor. They would be able to move with impunity as long as they avoided the security sweeps. Monson hoped this would not be too difficult to accomplish.
So how did you guys keep the door from locking?
Casey glanced at Artorius and said 2 words.
A penny?
I placed a penny in the... Shh! Casey pulled Monson and Artorius towards the brush.
Case, what the heck? Shush, Arthur. Follow me.
Casey, Artorius, and Monson each took a step back from the lighted path, the latter 2 looking towards Casey for direction. Casey's head whipped side to side a number of times until he abruptly started to move towards a cement bench not far from where they were standing. He broke out into a run as he neared the bench, and then launching himself over the shrub wall, he disappeared into the darkness. Monson and Artorius followed his lead. In retrospect, this was a very stupid move. There could have been any number of things waiting for the boys on the other side. Rocks, small trees, more branches, or rose bushes, just to name a few, were abundant on Corrin's property. Thankfully, all of the boys landed noiselessly on the semi-damp grass, popping up seconds after hitting the ground. They all flattened their bodies against the shrub, listening with held breath. Nothing happened. This continued for much longer than anyone could have expected, though the night was hardly quiet. Ragged breathing, pounding hearts, and nocturnal creatures filled their surroundings with sound, but not the one they were waiting for.
Casey.
Monson placed a hand on Casey's shoulder.
Why are we... Shush, Grey. Wait for it.
Casey pointed towards a section of lighted pathway, just under one of the lampost's sphere of influence. They watched the spot until a person popped out of seemingly nowhere. Monson rubbed his eyes. That could not be right, but true enough. A girl dressed in black, with curly blonde hair tied in a half ponytail, emerged from the darkness into the light, looking thoroughly distraught, but incredibly relieved. Monson squinted at the girl, only to recognize the face of Kylie Cormac. He took note of the massive backpack strapped over her shoulder and a large box brimming with documents that she was carrying. He lamented silently. He never knew how to deal with Casey and Kylie's drama. He was also suddenly regretting bringing Casey and Artorius. If he knew Casey, the boy would go and make a scene with her. He might as well just go back to his room.
Casey, please don't do anything. What are you doing?
Curious movements from Casey made Monson briefly forget his concerns. He watched as Casey bent over and started digging around the base of a shrub. He came back holding a couple of rocks.
Don't even think about it.
Monson grabbed at Casey's hand.
Yeah, Case, that's not cool. We can't let you throw rocks at her.
Casey did not utter a word, but put up a single finger. Artorius and Monson's exchanged look of concern held meaning, even in the severe lack of light. Casey always got so riled up when it came to Kylie. The boys spied on Kylie for what seemed like a long time, all the while wondering why she was there, or for that matter, how Casey knew she was coming. In reality, it probably was not that long. It just felt that way because of the darkness and silence. An almost trance-like state eventually settled upon the onlookers until invading voices and tapping footsteps roused them. The boys strained their eyes, staring at the blips of scattered lamplight plotted along the main pathway. Monson's heart skipped a stressful beat when he saw two MIBs walking straight towards Kylie, who was oblivious to the oncoming trouble.
What do we do? Kylie's gonna get caught.
Monson spoke a bit louder than he intended.
I got this. Stay hidden.
Monson reached out a hand.
Casey, wait!
Casey was already gone, moving to the opening in the bush wall not far away. Monson lost sight of him briefly as he traveled like a phantom through the grass and vegetation. When Monson finally found him again, Casey was already on the other side of the shrub wall, stalking the outskirts of the lighted areas. He moved with such stealth that Kylie did not notice his approach. Monson and Artorius ducked when a whistle and a tongue cluck caused Kylie to jump. Consequently, she jumbled the box in her arms and dropped it. She instantly went after the documents on the ground, gathering as many as possible. Monson whispered to Artorius.
What happened? I think Casey threw a rock at her.
Monson shrank back.
Man, your breath reeks. Hold up, I have a tic-tac. Shut up, Grey.
On the other side of the main pathway leading to the barracks, Kylie was finally realizing how craptastic her own situation was becoming as a second rock thrown by Casey landed to her side. The rustle and crack startled her and caused her to spin around. She stared at the MIBs the moment she caught sight of them.
That's her! Hey, you! Stop!
One of them yelled. They both started off after her. Kylie ran as fast as she could, but was hampered by the large backpack and box. While she had a decent head start, that distance was diminishing as the MIBs closed the gap. She rounded a corner, taking off into one of the many paths that led away from the barracks. The MIBs followed, gaining on her even faster than before. Monson felt his heart drop ever so slightly. The conclusion was pretty clear. Kylie Cormack was going to be caught by Christopher Barty's MIBs, and then, who knew what would happen to her? A blur wearing blue jeans and a red shirt sprang in front of the MIBs like a time traveler or teleporter making a jump. The two men did not have time to react, tripping over themselves and falling flat on their faces. Casey stood in front of them, watching with disdain. He waited for them to get back to their feet.
Another rule breaker.
The MIB reached into his jacket.
You bratty little kids think you can do anything you want. Jim, you go after the girl. I got this one.
The other MIB nodded his head and started to move past Casey, blatantly attempting to continue his pursuit of Kylie. Not seeing any Corn student as a threat, the big man never thought twice about Casey, and therefore did not see the two blows that Casey threw. At least, Monson thought they were two blows. Really, he could not be sure. The strikes were so fast that Monson was simply guessing at how many there were. And if Monson was not sure how many Casey threw, there was no way that Jim had a clue what hit him. Jim landed hard, mashing into the ground. Monson cringed. The blow and landing looked like they hurt, so Monson was surprised to see Jim spring to his feet, dusting his clothes off as he did. Jim spoke to the other MIB.
I think we need to teach this boy a lesson, Mark.
The other MIB, Mark, nodded his head.
Fine, but don't bloody him up too bad. Oh, I won't kill him or nothing.
Jim moved in an exaggerated way, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a black metal rod. Monson strained his eyes, desperately trying to make out the object in Jim's hands. A sharp swinging motion and a resounding click cleared the inquiry immediately. Jim held a retractable baton aggressively in front of him. Monson started to move almost instantly, fully intending to come to the aid of his friend. He let out a muffled yelp when an arm caught him and pulled him back down. Monson struggled against Artorius's overwhelming strength.
Arthur, what the? We need to help. Chill, Grey. Chill and watch.
As Monson looked back to the fray, he realized he would not have been able to get to Casey before the onslaught commenced anyway. Jim charged Casey, swinging his baton in a controlled, heavy overhand strike. Casey set his stance quickly, falling into his leg-centered form. He sidestepped Jim's attack at the last possible moment, throwing Jim slightly off balance. Casey countered, throwing 2 lower sweeps aimed at the legs, a high roundhouse, and an amazingly fast spinning back kick. Casey landed the last kick and instantly retreated. He performed a series of back handsprings that finished with a full backflip. He stuck the landing about 5 yards from a now prone Jim, who gaped at him in shock. The other MIB clapped appreciatively.
I think you just got it handed to you, Jim. Shove it, Mark.
Jim tossed a nasty scowl over his shoulder. After getting to his feet, Jim proceeded with a much greater level of caution. He stalked Casey, circling him like a hungry predator, and attacked only when he felt secure enough in his position. He should have stalked a little bit more. Jim's second attack, a sideways blow meant to crush his victim's shoulder, was just as ineffective as his first. The strike simply bounced off the extended foot of an airborne Casey. Jim stared in bug-eyed disbelief as the free-floating form of Cassius K struck him in the face. Monson wanted to say it was a kick, but, truthfully, like the first 2 blows Casey dealt Jim, the former was moving too fast to be sure. For a second time, the MIB Jim went flying.
Jim, you do realize that you got your ass kicked by a 10-year-old. The kid is slapping you around like a red-headed stepchild. You wouldn't like a hand, would you? I told you to shove it.
I'm 15. The arguing MIBs stopped their conversation mid-thought. Mark addressed Casey.
What was that, kid?
I said, I'm 15, not 10. And don't call me kid. The amused smirk on Mark's face instantly vanished. He glared at Casey with a newfound anger.
Listen, kid. I think it's about time you run off and play, before we get serious.
So, pulling a metal baton on me wasn't serious? You guys have some seriously messed up sensibilities. Casey adjusted his footing, widening his stance slightly. He continued his thought. I'll run off, if you leave the girl alone.
Sorry, kid. We can't do that. We need to find that girl. Mr. Gibson wants to talk to her. And seeing how you seem to know her, why don't you tell us who she is?
You see, we're at an impasse then. I need you to leave that girl alone. Mark's smile faded as he reached into his jacket.
I'm not playing around with you anymore, kid. Get out of the way.
Mark pulled out an incredibly long switchblade, which sprang to its full length as he pushed a small button. Casey's eyes lit up, becoming calculating and aggressive. Mark? Can I call you Mark? I'm completely disappointed, bro. A switchblade? Seriously? Dude, the 1980s called, and they want their cultural icon back. The double beep of a push-to-talk phone chimed before the MIB could do anything more than look imposing. A voice rang out from behind the handheld on his waist.
Hamill, you guys find that girl yet?
We are working on it, sir.
Well, work faster, morons. I want to see what she was doing around the complex. She gets back to that dorm and we'll never figure out who she is. Find her. Gibson out.
Mark replaced the phone, clipping it back to his belt.
Dude, your name is Mark Hamill?
Yeah, what of it? Casey started to laugh.
Your parents actually named you Mark Hamill? Oh, dude, that is rich. Did you hear that, Arthur? This dude's name is Mark Hamill. Look, I am your father. Dude, I seriously might pee myself.
Mark's incredulity raged as he started to move towards Casey. Monson again almost sprang to help his friend as Casey continued to chuckle. He fought against Artorius' grip.
Arthur, let me go. Grey, Casey has it under control.
Artorius was right, of course. Once he and Monson returned to watching the fight, it was plain to see that Casey was in control. Recovered from his laughter, Casey was in his striking form, throwing open and closed fist punches at Mark with the same frighteningly fast speed. Mark did his best to fend Casey off, but was quickly overpowered. Casey paused after a series of strikes to Mark's head and midsection and let the older man retreat. Mark returned to Jim's side, the latter still holding his steel baton.
What a buzzkill.
Casey let the intensity of his stance slack.
You two can't beat me. How about we just call it a night and go home?
The two men glared at Casey, a fine balance of embarrassment and hatred emanating from them. Jim turned to Mark and nodded towards Casey.
I think we take this kid instead of the girl.
Yeah, he's just one of those corn brats. He won't be missed. They stared at each other.
We're agreed then?
Yeah, just don't kill him. Mark pulled out a metal extendable rod, just like the one Jim was using. With a simultaneous small jerk downward, electric arcs danced across the black metal of both batons, which now looked more akin to cattle prods than anything else.
You know, kid?
Mark addressed Casey, dragging the baton across a nearby bush. The leaves sizzled and smoked from the coursing energy.
If you had just let us pass, we might have left the little girl's face intact. But now, I think your girlfriend is about to have a close and intimate encounter with my knife.
Casey's face went cold, and his lip curled as he answered.
Cassius K.
What was that, kid?
Mark cast Jim an unsure look.
I said, my name is Cassius K.
The two men burst into ear-grating laughter.
Are you retarded, Cassius? You just told us your name. You do realize it's over for you, right? Even if you could get away, we know who you are now. We'll find you. You can't run anymore.
Casey's arms came to rest at his side.
That's where you're wrong, Mark. I was doing you a favor by telling you my name. Really? You should be thanking me.
Aggressive words said in a calm tone seemed to have no perceivable effect on Mark's confidence.
What do you mean, Cassius?
A malicious smile crept its way onto Casey's face.
I mean, during the dark nights when you're in your hospital beds and you're dreaming of this moment, I want you to be able to put a name to the face of the man who beat you to a bloody pulp. I want you to scream out that name in your nightmares. The name that will ever be on the tip of your tongue, but will always elude you in your waking hours. I want you to reflect on the consequences of threatening me, forever considering, wondering, pondering the events of a night that you can't remember, but will always haunt you. Most of all, I want you to remember this final admonishment. It won't be a dream. Jeez, I almost feel sorry for you two.
A creepy speech, one that did not make an ounce of sense in light of the current circumstances. Monson felt a gush of pity for the two men, a gush that could not be explained. Mark and Jim's patience finally cracked. They charged Casey, swinging their stun batons wildly. Casey put his hands down to his side, palms out facing the men. He slowly closed his eyes, breathing serenely as the MIBs neared. Monson heard an audible crack as a noise emanated from Casey. Pressure hit Monson, hit everyone, driving all but Casey to the ground. The feeling was strange and foreign. It was as if Casey was controlling the air that was not physical in any sense of the word. The pressure felt spiritual in nature, energy that was not of the physical world. That energy attacked their senses, from touch to smell, penetrating every nook and cranny in their individual personas. The pressure was immense, completely unlike anything Monson had ever experienced. It was some time before Monson realized that last statement was not entirely true.
What the hell is going on?
Monson looked at Artorius from his hunched position on the ground.
What's happening?
Heck if I know.
Artorius tried to move towards Monson's side.
Grey, what are you doing?
A cold, saturated voice spoke to Monson.
Off your knees, little one. You will not be done in by this level of release.
Monson got to his feet. Pressure met pressure as Monson's own foreign emotion, with its accompanying power, blossomed from inside him. The concept was truly insane, unnatural, psychotic even. But that did not seem to matter right now, as that power infused him. Screams filled his ears, a blood-curdling sound that encircled everything. Monson searched for the source of the screaming, only to have his attention completely captured by what he saw in front of Casey. The blood-red mist was back. Monson stared in complete shock as his brain grasped at the memory simmering in the back of his mind. Flash Fist. He thought back to that sparring match and the volatile ball of blood-red energy that had struck him and tossed him to the ground. He remembered the strange conglomerated mist as he flew and crumbled into the mat. He remembered the feeling associated with this strange phenomenon, as that same phenomenon once again flooded over his body, and all around him. Monson stared through the mist as it streamed from Casey. Stark differences in Casey's signature move became readily apparent the more Monson watched him. He noticed the difference in stance, the use of both hands instead of one, and the dramatic increase in overall power. The changes or differences were minor and unimportant in the comparison to what really caught Monson off guard. He, Monson Grey, could not see Casey's flash fist with any amount of clarity as he could just moments before. The image of the mist broke in and out of his vision, like a television on the fritz. He could see it, then he could not. He could see it. He could not see it. He could see it. He could not see it. Monson watched as the MIBs, now finally on their feet, ran towards Casey. Monson felt the compressed energy discharge as Casey struck the two MIBs directly in the head. Supernatural wind, accelerated and infused, deafened him, causing a minor but potent vertigo. All extraneous and mundane appetites dulled to a fuming simmer as a random plateau of clarity cruised upward and peaked. Realization, like light from heaven, formulated and highlighted the understanding that Casey's power, the very power that swarmed their surroundings like locusts now, was not unique to Casey alone. This power, whatever it was also inside Monson. The realization breached something within him as a second voice tuned in loud and clear. This second voice was calming, yet stern, and sounded strikingly like his own.
Enough of this, Keeper. It is not your time. Release him. It is his to command. Not yours.
The spiritual powers inside of him, converged and conflicted, came crashing into one another, driving Monson to the brink of his own sanity. The battle of diverging entities was like nothing he could have imagined, vast and unearthly. Endless images rifled through him until the vision of a man standing in an open field jumped out so suddenly that Monson took an unsure step back. The scene was like that of a movie, with the view of a man, wild and ferocious, standing in the distance. Monson's camera-like view careened faster and faster, focusing all the more intently until it finally came to rest on a pair of savage, silver eyes. The eyes bore down upon him. The cold voice spoke again.
Let me out.
Monson pushed it away, tried to run, but was helpless under the influence of the silver eyes. He was going to fall, and there was nothing he could do about it.
I told you, let him go.
Fiery pain fought against foreign emotion that held Monson captive, the intangibles taking on a new meaning and life as they strove against each other. The pain slithered up his body as his view shifted sharply. A pillar of bright silver light slammed into the ground, sending energy and debris everywhere. Once the light and dust settled, a person, wrapped in a silver mist, drove the man in the open field back. Monson could not see the face of this second figure, as the two combatants were engaged in an all-out struggle, but he tried desperately to do so, ignoring the steady increase in physical pain. The newcomer gestured wildly, the mists of silver swirling and trailing as fingers flew through the air. The figure spoke, though inaudibly. Monson beheld columns of pure energy falling and trapping the man. At this, Monson fell to his knees, grabbing his head as anything and everything supernatural flowed from him, leaving a mass of confusion behind.